Tazinski in her first meeting as the clerk, and look forward to working with both. I want to thank all of the broadcasters and the media who reported on our meeting, and we'll call this meeting to order. Madam Clerk.
Under Agenda Item 1, I have a motion by Councillors Shoemaker and Christian resolved that the minutes of regular council meeting of July 15, 2019 be approved.
All in favor? Carried. As you can see, Council, our electronic voting should be working tonight. We're hopeful.
Councillor Christian Casanero. Under Agenda Item 4, a motion by Councillors Shoemaker and Christian resolved that the agenda for August 12, 2019 City Council meeting as presented be approved.
I think we have to declare pecuniary
Oh, I'm
interest
sorry, I
first, Madam
skipped
Clerk.
right past that. Councillor Hilsinger has declared a conflict of interest with respect to item A1319 Z 71 Old Garden River Road, as she has a relationship with the Water Tower Inn, which is a neighboring property. Also with respect to agenda item 5.2, heavy equipment as defined in the zoning bylaw, as her father is proprietor of the Water Tower Inn.
Any other councillors? Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a number of them, actually. So I'll start with 5.2, the heavy equipment presentation by Mr. McDonald. As a number of the parties involved in that dispute are clients of my law firm. And then I've got as well item 6.9 and corresponding bylaw 11.1.1, which is 22 McDonald Avenue, as the owners of that property are clients of my law firm. And then I've got the rezoning of Old Garden River Road, which is agenda item 7.7.2, as the owners of that property are clients of my law firm. And then I've got bylaw 11.1.3 and 11.1.4, which are the rezoning of the property at 647 McDonald, approved at the last council meeting, as the owners of that property are clients of my law firm.
Okay. All noted. Any other councillors with conflicts? Seeing none? I think we can move to item 4 now, Madam Clerk.
Okay, resolved that the agenda for August 12, 2019 City Council meeting as presented be approved.
All in favor? Carried. So that brings us to proclamations.
Under Agenda Item 5.1, Social Services Awareness Week, Mike Nadeau is in attendance.
Welcome to council, Mr. Nadeau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Really excited to have this proclamation before you tonight. Social services is an underknown and underrepresented part of our community, and the intent of having Social Services Awareness Week is just to highlight the great work that many agencies across the community are doing. Last year we started with just the DSAB and some of our own initiatives. This year, 10 organizations will be participating in that week, and I'd just like to invite the community to come out on August the 23rd, next Friday. There's Game On in the Chapel Albion community. Many free activities, free hot dogs, free hamburgers, free ice cream, free kids games, and we have 5 celebrity guests lined up. We're not going to say who they are this week. However, if the community watches the NHL, they may want to bring their children to get some autographs. Wow. So we just really proud of the initiative and hope the community can come.
That's great, and you're doing great work over there, Mike, so congratulations to you and your entire team.
Thank you.
Whereas social services are vital to our community's health, well-being, and prosperity, and whereas Social Services Awareness Week highlights the unique and comprehensive services available within the city of Sault Ste. Marie, and whereas Social Services Awareness Week is an inclusive event that promotes the development of a community where everyone is valued, respected, and recognized, and whereas community social service agencies have come together with the aim of increasing public awareness about the programs and services available within our community, and whereas residents of Sault Ste. Marie and surrounding area are encouraged to engage, learn, and fully participate in the events scheduled throughout the week. Now therefore, I, Christian Provenzano, as Mayor of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby proclaim August 19th to August 23rd, 2019 as Social Services Awareness Week, and invite all members of the community to learn, take part, and acknowledge the services and contributions that social services provides for the betterment of our community. Thank you, Mike.
Which, thank you very much.
I think that the proclamation might be right there. You got it?
Yes, I do.
Under Agenda Item 5.2, heavy equipment as defined in zoning bylaw 2005-150. Hugh McDonald, counsel for the water tower, and is in attendance.
Mr. McDonald, before you start, I'll just maybe give a brief bit of context. As council's aware, Mr. McDonald has reached out to council a number of times electronically, and he'd reached out to me recently because he's got some concern over how staff are interpreting and applying a bylaw, and he thought it appropriate that council consider the matter. The difficulty he had is the councillors of the ward that this is relevant to are both, as you see, the Ward 3 councillors who are both declared in conflict, so there was no way to bring a motion to get the matter before council. So we had a discussion about that, and I told him the process would be to ask agenda review for that consideration. He did. Agenda review considered the matter and thought since it goes to the substance of a bylaw, it was appropriate that he have an opportunity to present to us. He's been given, in accord with the rules of procedure, 5 minutes to present to us, and the matter will be referred in accord with the motion back to staff for staff's consideration, and we'll receive a report back. So we'll receive a report back hopefully at our next meeting, and we can have a kind of discussion at that point about the substance of the matter. Councillor Nero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just procedurally, so council's being asked to look at a report that's coming back from staff. In the meantime, things are going ahead on that property. So where do we find ourselves in that situation?
Well, things are developed and have been developing on that property, and in staff's opinion, they're developing kind of in accord with the bylaw as it's currently passed. But the issue that the proponent here in front of us today wants to raise is the proper application of that bylaw. But in the meantime, we have to adhere to the bylaw that we have, so we're not arresting anything.
Yeah, and I have no problem. I think what's being done is proper, and we need to listen to it. I'm just thinking of what position council is in if this keeps going ahead and we decide to change this bylaw. What kind of position is council in?
I don't think it'd be a matter of changing it. I think it would be a matter of kind of discussing the interpretation of it and how it's being applied. But I'll let the CEO speak to it. And one of the reasons why we'd like it back sooner rather than later is not to exacerbate that issue of timing.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero, the work that's going ahead is going ahead according to a site plan agreement. So it is going ahead as far as staff is concerned by everything's being done properly. The issue before us is Mr. McDonald is here to speak to his client about how the bylaw is worded and whether it is clear as it should be. And that'll be the matter that staff has to take back and bring a report back to you. In the meantime, I don't see that there's any tool or method that staff would have to stop what's being developed.
All right, fair enough. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So, Mr. McDonald?
Well, Mr. Mayor, members of council, thank you for giving me the opportunity to come here. This I wouldn't ask for that without this being a serious, very serious concern, not only to my client, the water tower inn that's immediately affected and very close to the plan work that the new Cal Tire site is proposing to perform on that site. But there are at least two other neighboring parties that have sent letters of concern to the mayor and council, Sioux College and the Cara community residences that are affected as well. Not quite so extraordinarily affected as may be the case here. Currently, Cal Tire, it's clear, is planning on relocating to the Old Garden River Road site, which is zoned C4. They are currently in the industrial park, an M zone, and at that site, as most of the members here are aware, they perform both industrial and heavy commercial equipment repair, and sell and supply large heavy equipment components, primarily tires, for their commercial customers. The C4 zone in which they are now moving to excludes, by the bylaw passed by this council, the repairs of heavy equipment and the sale of heavy equipment parts in the current zone. So the new zone is not the zone they were in. The new zone excludes heavy equipment repair and the sale of heavy equipment parts. And there are reasons, I don't need to tell this council, why the bylaw excludes certain heavy uses in a commercial zone and restricts them to industrial. Noise, odors, vibration, unsightly locations, heavy machinery, and heavy traffic effect damaging roads. The problem here, and why I'm before you, is because the bylaw that this organization passed in 2005 does not define heavy equipment. It defines a lot of other things, but does not define heavy equipment. If you look in the package that I circulated, the market considers heavy equipment to include trucks and trailers, transport trucks as we call them. And attached in the material handout is a website of a common dealer of this kind of material. And in the top categories are trucks and trailers that are heavy machines, heavy equipment. The staff, to this point, have indicated, including on the site plan, the location outdoors, right near the windows of the rooms of the water tower inn, a reinforced concrete pad to do the work on their transport trucks on this site, but also to do it outdoors, year-round, with their pneumatic tools, pry bars, and heavy equipment, dieseling in and out along the south facade of the hotel. This is a very serious problem. It's effectively transplanting their industrial use into a commercial zone where this should not be the interpretation. Unfortunately, staff to this point have not indicated what the real fleshing out of heavy equipment means to them. I'm asking what it means to you, because it's your bylaw that says heavy equipment is excluded from this zone. Right now, Old Garden River Road is not a truck route. You can't drive a transport truck on Old Garden River Road right now without getting a ticket. The bylaw for the truck zones, it's a traffic bylaw, defines heavy trucks as the only items that are banned from the roadways that aren't designated and constructed as truck routes. So ironically, the interpretation coming back from planning staff to this point has been that although they are not, the heavy trucks are banned in this city from city streets, heavy trucks are not heavy equipment. And when you ask them what heavy equipment is, they indicate things that are farm equipment or tractors, and or they're not explaining what it might be, but they're definitely saying that the transport trucks, in their opinion, were not meant to be heavy equipment by this council. We take issue with that strongly, because here is a prime example where 176 rooms of well-established commercial hotel property is going to be extremely heavily impacted by not only the noise and regularity of this industrial work going on these very heavy trucks that are otherwise not permitted on the streets. And I submit, and my time is limited here, that it's if transport trucks are too heavy for Old Garden River Road, how can they not be heavy equipment to city staff when it comes to regulating the use and repair of them in this community? One of the items at the back of the handout is the most recent site plan that the city has, from my understanding, given preliminary approval to. And if you would look to that, you will see that in the northern apex of the Cal Tire relocated property, there's a white area that is a concrete truck pad. Why is it concrete? Because the vehicles they're going to work on are too heavy to be on that site without a specially reinforced deck. And they're too big to be inside being worked on in the interior where they may perform work on passenger cars and the like. How do they get to this site when there's no truck route? Well, there's a bit of a provision in the traffic bylaw that allows somebody to take their truck to a repair facility that's not on a truck route. But by interpreting this bylaw the way staff would like it interpreted, the entire length of Old Garden River Road in that area from Second Line to Great Northern Road will now become a truck route without city having authorized it. What that will cost the taxpayer, I don't know. What will cost the users of that road is fairly obvious. What it will cost the water tower inn to have to tolerate that industrial activity, we can't measure. That's my 5 minutes. I won't say anything more except that I'd ask council to take ownership of their own bylaw. It's not staff that tells you what it means. It's you that interprets and clarifies what was meant when that bylaw was passed. So thank you very much for the opportunity to come forward and speak to you tonight.
Thank you. I almost called you Hugh. Sorry. Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Council, if you had any questions for staff on the motion that's before us, you can ask those. Seeing none, we'll call a vote on the motion.
I have a motion by Councillors Bruni and Nero, resolved at the request of Hugh MacDonald, Council for the Water Tower Inn, for an interpretation of the definition of heavy equipment in zoning bylaw 2005-150 be referred to staff for report back to council.
Any questions or comments, councillors? Councillor Nero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Will this be coming back next meeting?
Or that's certainly
the
the
plan?
intention. That's the plan.
Thank you.
I can't speak for staff in that respect, but we're hopeful that's the case. I'll have the CEO speak to that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero, I believe because we have almost a month between meetings that we should be able to abide by that timeline.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Gardy.
My question is, follows along the same kind of line as the initial one by Mr. Nero. Like, so what follows this, considering what's going on there already?
Staff is going to take the material that has been provided by Mr. McDonald,
Right.
have whatever discussions they see appropriate, then staff's going to give us a report
Yes.
explaining why they're interpreting the bylaw the way they are and what they see as the proper interpretation. And then, as Mr. McDonald's pointed out, we're going to have to make a decision. We're going to make a decision whether or not we agree that it's being applied properly. And if we do, things will continue as they are. And if in our estimation, after we've received all the information, we don't agree with it, well, then we'll have to deal with that at that time. But there will be likely legal consequences to that, or some type of consequences to that, because the development has proceeded to date. But we didn't think those were good reasons not to hear the position. Like, so it's not a comfortable position, and we are, I recognize Councilor Nero's initial point, we're in an awkward position, but you can't avoid an awkward position just because it might create a problem. So we have to deal with it head on, and we'll see what comes out at our next meeting. Councilor Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure who to direct this toward. Is there no provincial definition for heavy equipment in maybe like the provincial?
I think there's, Mr. McDonald will probably agree with me, I think there's lots of different definitions of heavy equipment, depending on where you look. But there isn't a provincial definition of heavy equipment that we're, as I understand it, bound by.
So this is more just a local interpretation then, would be the ultimate goal?
I think how staff will say it's how we've historically interpreted our bylaw. The bylaw was passed in 2005, obviously long before this council, and we'll have to get the information from them as to why they're interpreting it the way they are, and we'll have to make a judgment on that. Councilor Dufour?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As part of the report, will planning staff be able to provide us with maybe some other case studies or contexts in which this bylaw has been applied in Sault Ste. Marie according to their interpretation?
We can certainly ask them to make their best efforts to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all in favor? Motion carried.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Okay, so Mr. Ver, we're with you.
Agenda item 5.3, Downtown Plaza Development.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and to council, we have a brief presentation to provide you today on the Downtown Plaza development. The background is certainly, council is well aware, revitalizing Sault Ste. Marie's downtown has been a recognized community priority. It's part of the corporate strategic plan. Our downtown department has undertaken numerous revitalization efforts and had some great success with those programs that they've run through the downtown development strategy and the third generation of the community improvement plan for downtown. Obviously, we have the business improvement area, the Sault Ste. Marie Downtown Association. Future SSM also has a downtown development action team. Last year, we had Roger Brooks come and provide a review of our downtown and make some recommendations. It's an important component to tourism and also in general as part of community development best practices. I think to sum it up, a quote or a couple lines we took from Roger Brooks, that downtown is the litmus test for the health of a community. And that goes for site selectors, investors, and newcomers considering moving. So when people come to your downtown, that's often how they assess the health of the community. And another item that Roger Brooks had pointed out, if no locals are there, no visitors are going to be visiting your downtown either. So this has to be a place in the community where we draw residents from Sault Ste. Marie for events and activities on a regular basis. So we've been working with the planning partnership, and the planning staff have been working for some time on the considerations for a downtown plaza. And I think the work of Roger Brooks just confirmed the work that was already underway and the ideas we had for a central gathering place in the core of our downtown. This initial rendering is a view from Queen Street, and you can see a water feature, a stage or pavilion in the background with a large screen there, and in the distance in the background, that's actually Stone's office building. So I'll give you a location along Queen Street there. There is a building that's located currently in the heart of that plaza, and that's on the agenda for tonight to acquire that building. The bylaw is presented elsewhere in the council package. The real goal for the plaza is to be a four-season destination. And obviously, we're a winter city, and we want to be able to utilize the plaza for events and activities in summer, fall, spring, and winter. And the next slide shows a rendering of the plaza in the winter months. You can see there's a small skating pad there. We have a market illustrated in the background, Christmas market, lighting and activities ongoing in the wintertime as well. And that's an important component of the four-season nature of this plaza. The next slides just walk through some precedent images from other plazas, highlighting the features that we'd like to see incorporated in our downtown plaza. So water features that are fun for kids, but also something that are visual appealing to sit and watch as well. We have a large stage and a large screen. These two shots are from, on the top and bottom left are from Brampton and their Civic Plaza, and you can see they have a movie night. People bring their lawn chairs and watch the movies. In the bottom right is the plaza that's behind Mississauga City Hall with two large screens and a stage. An important feature of any plaza is the lighting for evening use and make an attractive feature for the plaza. So we've shown what they call catenary lighting from different plazas around the world. And that's a feature we hope to incorporate in our plaza. As well, on the next slide, we have public art. So we want to go out to the public and get thoughts on public art for the downtown plaza. Staff have talked about a number of ideas, including something would recognize our First Nations heritage, and also something that may tie into the Sioux Greyhounds. A few years ago, the Hockey News ran a story about the best junior hockey factory and compared a number of cities, NCAA teams, and Sault Ste. Marie was number one on that list. So that was something we thought might be of interest to have in the plaza. Next slide showed a skating rink. I've already touched on that for winter use. Also, trees and benches, obviously a place for people to gather, socialize, and sit in an attractive environment. And play feature for children. So this gives you two different shots, one kind of a more modern play structure and the other a natural play feature. And again, in this case, we'd like to go out and talk with youth in the community and get their thoughts and ideas on what they would like to see in their plaza. So the next slide is a bird's eye view of the plaza. You can see the water feature at the front along Queen Street, and the plaza would actually run from Queen down to Bay Street. There's still retained some area for parking on the west side, and then a large event space that's in behind there. And so we envision that that stage and pavilion will face both directions. So you can have smaller events in the front and then larger events utilizing the back space. The next slide is the vision for Queen Street. And what we wanted to do here is just kind of tie together the revitalization plans for the downtown. So in the next few years, we're looking at redoing Queen Street and upgrading the benches and the amenities along Queen. We have Bay Street that's already underway on the next slide. And then our vision for Spring Street is to really connect the waterfront and provide a, what they call a WUNERF, is a term for a pedestrian-friendly street. And you can envision people coming off the cruise ship. There'll be natural cues for those people as they come off that cruise ship on how they walk, where they would walk, and connect them with our downtown, as well as for residents, obviously, in the community. And it also provides an opportunity to do some interesting programming along Spring Street as we work to connect the waterfront to our downtown. That's always been a key goal of the planning department. So this slide is really that vision again. You've got Queen Street revitalized, the plaza, Bay Street, the connection from the downtown to the waterfront along Spring Street. As council's aware, we've just upgraded the marina. We undertook the RFP, and we have a beaver tails at the pavilion, and we're seeing increased cruise ship traffic along our waterfront. So we see this as kind of a key focal area for the downtown in a way to really help revitalize and continue the momentum we're experiencing in our downtown currently. So the why, we've already talked about the health of downtown and why it's vital to economic development. We also believe that this is a great way to incentivize new development in our downtown. Help to drive tax assessment and increase property valuations, which is obviously important to the city and to our business owners. It's part of our corporate strategic plan. It will provide space for community events and activity year-round. And, talking with the BIA, we can't close Queen Street every time we want to have an event, and we need an event that's going to provide a great venue for ongoing activities in our downtown and also support tourism initiatives. Further, we think it's going to be a boost as well for community pride and morale. Roger Brooks talks about your downtown as the community living room, as that place beyond home and work for people to gather. Also, it'll be an age-friendly place, place that will provide events and activities for our youth and seniors, a place where people can have fun. And I think the recent success of events like the downtown garage sale, the Jurassic Park that we had at the Roberta Bondar Pavilion, the Poutine Fest or Feast, and the success we've seen in the street parties most recently are evidence that people are interested in these types of events, and we're seeing increased participation in them. And then finally, we believe the city can and should demonstrate leadership in this area for downtown revitalization. With the planning partnership, they've put together a high-level cost for the plaza. At this stage, we are looking at approximately $6.2 million for the plaza construction itself. We anticipate property acquisition of about $400,000 for a cost of $6.6 million. We've talked with representatives of funding organizations from other levels of government, and we'll be looking for council's permission to submit funding applications, and we believe there's a chance we can receive funding, as well to have different features of that plaza open for sponsorship, as well as donations, so people would be able to buy a brick or buy a chair, a tree, et cetera. So our hope is the city share would be approximately half of that cost, $3.2 million for the plaza construction. Just a reminder for council, in terms of funds allocated in our 2019 budget, we did have some money set aside towards amenity improvements, which we believe can apply towards the detailed design and costs for the plaza or go towards them. There were some funds that were set aside from the gas tax related to the plaza, and it was anticipated the portion that was taken for Bay Street could be applied to the plaza project in 2020, subject to council approval in the budget. And then also last year in the budget, we had $500,000 set aside for growth initiatives, and that's money that we could use to apply a portion of towards the plaza in the years forward, depending on our success in the funding applications. We did provide a high-level overview of the different costs for the plaza. Again, it's early at this stage. We've got a number of contingencies built in there, and we look forward to working with the next level of engineering and design work in the community really to finalize the design and features of that plaza. The path forward is, again, tonight we have the property acquisition elsewhere on the agenda. We want to go out to the public, businesses and youth for consultation on this plaza, get people's thoughts and ideas. At the same time, in parallel, we'll be undertaking an RFP for the detailed design and costing. Then when we come back to council for approval, look at the fundraising campaign, look at different public art collaborations, and then our goal is to have it back for council approval in the budget this year, and hopefully can start construction next spring. Just a quick checklist. One of the webinars from Roger Brooks looked at the top recommendations for plazas, and we believe we've incorporated all those key features into the design of this public plaza. It has to be in the heart of our downtown, home to activities 12 months a year. Music and lighting is critical. Public restrooms are a must. Ample vendor space. Beautification. Plazas and public markets should be joined at the hip. Include water. Permanent stage, amphitheater space, and multiple levels create intimate spaces. And so we believe we can incorporate all these features into this plaza and have a winning feature in our downtown. And the last slide just summarizes, again, to say that it's really designed for 4 seasons, day and evening, activities for young and old, really with that goal of 250 days a year to have activity in our downtown and a space that will help to avoid closing Queen Street more frequently as we want to ramp up the number of events in our downtown.
Thank you, Mr. Ver. So, council, before we take questions and comments, I just wanted to recognize Tom, Don McConnell, Peter, and Steve. The planning staff has been working hard on this. I've been working hard on this with them for well over a year now. We started looking at this prior to Roger Brooks coming to the Sioux. And what Roger Brooks did was just confirm what we believed, which was we needed some significant development in the heart of our downtown that created a northwest corridor, north-south corridor down to the water and created some activity right in the middle of our downtown. And I think after a lot of work and a lot of effort and a lot of thought, we've come up with a really exciting project that's got some ambition, and it's a matter of investing in ourselves and believing in ourselves. But I actually think there's very, very little risk to it. And we've structured in such a way where we're looking to do it within our current levy, so this wouldn't be in addition to the levy. But I think it really speaks loudly to our desire as a community to look forward and to be progressive and to grow and to invest in ourselves. And I think, we're turning what is now just really a parking lot that we own into a really attractive space in the heart of our downtown that we could use for a number of generations to come and really enjoy. If you build it, they will come. I mean, you've seen the desire for activity in the downtown. You saw the reaction to the Jurassic Parks. You see, I'm sure all of you have gotten a lot of comments about the marina. I know I have received a tremendous number of comments about the marina and how nice it looks, and I think that's really positive development. And you're seeing the Downtown Association do great events and actually get really impressive responses to them. So I think that this just adds to that and gives us another piece of infrastructure that we can use as a community. So I'm excited at where we're at, and I just want to thank the planning staff for working so hard on this and bringing what I think is a great project to council for your consideration. So councilors, Councilor Bruni.
A couple of questions. This is very exciting. To Mr. Ver, regarding, I guess your last screen, it says activity 250 days a year. So something will be happening there for 250 days a year.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Bruni, that was something that Roger Brooks had recommended, and we were digging into that as staff to say, you know, is it 250 events? And he was quick to clarify, no. You know, if you have a rink in your downtown plaza and you've got, 60 days of, availability of your rink, well, there's 60 days of activity right there. So it's part of the programming aspect by having features, play features, et cetera, that will help to drive people to the plaza. So it's not necessarily events 250 days, but it's activities.
Okay, thank you. On page 16, your snapshot there. So vehicles will be allowed to drive through from Bay Street to Queen Street?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Bruni, no, what we envision is vehicles will be able to enter from Bay Street into the parking lot, but they won't be able to drive through that top area of the plaza. Access would be through the Bay Street side.
Just Bay Street?
Right.
Okay. Our city goal is, or our city share is 3.2 million. How much fundraising is required? Does that fundraising offset the 3.2 million?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Bruni, the 3.2 we envision to be the city share. The fundraising offsets the other 3.2.
So is there a goal for fundraising? Has that been established yet?
We haven't finalized the goal. We hope to bring that back to council. We have some ideas, and as well, we've engaged in some preliminary conversations with the funders. So based on all those factors, we want to come back and we'll have a final number for you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Gardy.
My question was much like Mr. Bruni's. When it comes to the 3.4 million, Mr. Ver, that's government funding and sponsorship. Is that government funding in addition to any other outside kind of fundraising that goes on for sponsorship, or is that one? Are they, you know what I'm saying? Because I'm thinking the 3.4 million, is that that may be a heavy lift from our other partners at different levels of government for a project like this, or is it not?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Gardy, yeah, that number, the 3.4, included both government funding and sponsorship donations.
Thank you. And one further question, just to give us a little even better idea as to the scope or the size, in terms of, say, seating capacity for an event, much as like you alluded to went on Jurassic Park down at the Pavilion, how many people do you think we could safely get in there to watch an event like that on that big screen? Do you have any idea of numbers?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Gardy, working with the planning partnership, they had some estimates. I believe it was about 2,500 on the back side of the plaza. And then on the front side, another 500, if I'm not mistaken. A little bit bigger? Okay.
Okay.
So in that range.
Thank you.
Councilor Vezo-Allen.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Ver, we've been getting really good feedback, Mr. Ver, from all the downtown events, especially the murals, people commenting about the murals. So thank you so much for working with your team, and really, it's made such a big impact, I think, in our downtown. Regarding the budget, I see that you have, with the ice rink and water features, $750,000. Will we continue to have an ice rink at Clerg Park, or would you just keep the ice feature at the new space and not Clerg Park?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Vezo-Allen, at this point, we envision continuing with the skating trail. When we talked about the skating feature in the plaza with our colleagues in Public Works, They reminded us that, we've had a really good year last year with the skating trail, which was fantastic, but we have had some winters where, we've had 10 days of ice time. So what the skating feature will enable us to do with compressors is to have a guaranteed set of ice, like they do in Toronto outside their city hall, right through the winter season.
So similar to the Nathan Phillips Square, they can keep it frozen. Now adding, the budget is hefty. Have you considered revenue models for the space, such as if we're having a skating rink, skate rentals, things like that? Also, will the venue be available for someone to rent for their own events, which I know we do with the Bondar Pavilion? So will we have a similar business model so that we can, create some revenue flow from this space?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezowalan, we've discussed, I guess, at a preliminary stage, different opportunities for revenue generation ongoing from the plaza, so that's certainly something we'll look at in more detail.
Okay. And just one more question regarding the fundraising. Are you considering doing it in collaboration with the Downtown Association to do as far as fundraising efforts? Because I know staff time, expertise, fundraising is not an easy thing and not something everyone likes to do.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezowalan, yes, we have been in discussions with the Downtown Association, and Josh and Ingram and I were just speaking on Friday, and I think we'll be working with them very closely on this going forward.
Okay. And just a comment, Councillor Hilsinger and I were on the Downtown Safe Walk a couple of weeks ago, and the one thing that came up was that there are no public restrooms. So super happy to see that restrooms are there in the downtown, and as someone who's had small children, you're sort of like having to ask somebody if you could use their washroom or if you're at an event or just shopping, right? Like there's no public restroom. So very pleased to see that as a feature, because that came up not just with Councillor Hilsinger and I, but also with the other people that were participating in the downtown walk. That was sort of top of the list, was the fact that there weren't any restrooms. So thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezowalan, that is something we talked about with the planning partnership, and they shared with us a number of very innovative, attractive designs that other communities have used for these public facilities. And I would say that the kind of the bar has been raised in how these are designed and the aesthetics of these now going forward. So we're excited to have that feature incorporated in.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, let me say that the design looks great, so kudos to planning and community economic development and enterprise for coming up with this. Is there a risk with the plaza space that we cannibalize the activities that are currently taking place at the Bondar tent?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, we don't believe so. There's kind of very specific events that take place now at the Roberta Bondar tent that we imagine will continue on. We've talked to different groups about, in fact, actually having these two spaces be complementary and be able to run events that stretch out from the Roberta Bondar tent right through to the new downtown plaza.
Okay, good. Yeah, because it is costly. Not that it's outrageously costly compared to other capital projects, but you don't want to see it offset. You don't want to see it decrease the revenue in other areas as well.
Yeah.
Councillor Nero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, let me echo your comments. I think this is a very exciting plan, and it was a long time coming. The rendings are great, and I fully support this project. Mr. Ver, I have one question. It's on page 21 of your presentation. On the funds allocated, the $256,000 towards downtown amenity improvements, are those specific improvements, or they were just allotted to downtown improvements without any attachments to them?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero. To Councillor Nero, that was in the growth initiatives item within the capital budget plan, and at the time we talked with council about applying those funds to various amenities, which could include a public plaza. We were kind of looking ahead to what we envisioned would be coming, so it was open to be applied towards this type of activity.
So bottom line, there's nothing lost here. It's going to happen within the bigger project.
Yeah. Correct. That was the intention. So council knew we were working on this, and seeing ahead and knowing we would need some money, when we earmarked those monies, this was one of the projects we realized we could allocate them to if council ultimately approved it.
Right, specifically going back to the Brooks recommendations,
That's right.
there were a number of them.
Yeah.
This 256 was not attached to any one.
No.
Or any
In
number of those.
It wasn't, but in our minds, this was the main thing we would need the money for to get moving if you allowed us to get moving with it.
Yep, understandable. Thank you.
Councilor Christian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And again, I echo those comments as well that were made so far. This really is exciting. It's ironic that the last term of council, and we've stated this before, was one where, we're dealing with a lot of crises and we're trying to manage the best we can, but it looks like we've turned the corner and we're starting to try to grow the community. We're trying to be visionary. And this is just a great example of it. And I look at this along with the developments on Bay Street and what we're trying to do with some connecting roads. This is real city planning, and I think it sets us up well for the future. I do have one question. Same page as Councillor Nero to Mr. Ver, through you, Mr. Mayor. Just to confirm, Mr. Ver, $2.5 million of funds that were earmarked for the plaza through gas tax money was partially used for Bay Street. To be clear, we will, by the end of next budget cycle, have that $2.5 million available for this project. Is that correct?
That's the goal.
Okay. And we also have 500 in capital set aside potentially for this project as well.
During the last budget cycle, we set aside 500 for growth initiatives on a going forward basis.
So
And
what
that's
I'm
not
getting at,
earmarked,
just so that, for my understanding in public consumption, if we were to receive sponsorship and government funding, what's left to cover for this project is virtually zero from the city side, if 3.2 million is our portion of it. If we were lucky enough to get the
Yeah.
3.4 million in funding.
We could do it within our current levy.
Yes, and
Yeah,
I
we
think
won't-
that's a
won't-
salient point that I
You
want to
wanna
be clear on, and I want the public to be clear on. Given that there's still some variables out there, but it's a workable plan that's quite achievable
We're not adding this expense onto
That's
our
right.
levy. We're
That's
we're
right.
finding the money in the budget.
within the budget.
And we're prioritizing the project.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. To your point, though, Councilor Christian, I think it's a critical one. While we were dealing with challenges last term, we were looking ahead and working on
Yes.
projects, and frankly, we were working on this project last term.
Yes. Yeah.
And council gave us the leeway to do that, and I think you're seeing now some of that hard work paying off, and we're seeing some exciting projects come out. I think it's important to recognize, though, subject to council's approval, we're going to start a consultation phase where we hope to really engage the community and get some feedback from them so that they can take some ownership over this, and they can also have some input as to what it looks like and what we do there. So that's an important message for the community. The die is not cast. We certainly have a vision and a direction, but we're going to be going out over the near term now and soliciting further feedback from stakeholders, from youth. We've met with a number of people to show it to them privately that would be affected by it, and the results and the people that have seen it, it's all been very positive. Any other questions, council? Seeing none, did you read the motion, Madam Clerk?
A motion by Councillors Hilsinger and Christian, resolved that the report of the Deputy CAO Community Development and Enterprise Services dated August 12, 2019 concerning the downtown plaza be received, that the purchase of property be approved, and that funding of $110,134 from the Property Purchase Reserve Fund be approved.
All in favor?
And there's a bylaw under the bylaw consent agenda.
Motion carried. Do you have to read the bylaw now?
I just have it under consent.
Okay, it's under consent. Okay, carried. Before we move on, in recognizing our CEO and our clerk, I didn't recognize, and I apologize, for the purpose of everybody watching, we have our Deputy Fire Chief here, and he might not be familiar to everybody in the community, so we have Deputy Fire Chief Stuart Cole with us tonight, taking the Fire Chief's place. So welcome to council, Deputy. Appreciate having you here. Madam Clerk, we can move on to the consent agenda. Council, matters in the consent agenda. Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No parking on Saddle Crescent. This is report 6.13.
Yep.
I just wanted to thank the legal department and the residents for having brought this forward. It's been a couple of years of back and forth on this one, and finally the residents have come to the determination that they would rather prohibit parking altogether than face the continued parking of Sioux Area Hospital patrons on their street. So I congratulate the residents for bringing this forward.
Anybody else in 6.13? Okay. Councilor Shoemaker, do you have any more matters?
I have a proposed amendment which is on the addendum to 6.5, and I'm not sure if that,
It's been accepted to,
okay,
to
yeah.
have it separated. yeah.
Perfect. I think that is it.
Anybody else for consent matters? So I think 6.5 is accepted from consent?
6.5 and 6.9 on account of Councillor Shoemaker's conflict.
Okay. So, Councillor Scott. Can I have Councillor Scott's mic, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 6.3, the RFP for professional services, third-party service delivery review. I just have a question, and I think this might go to Ms. Schell. So it's my understanding that we are going to attempt to kind of bundle up the audit and accountability fund with the work that we were already planning that was similar. Is that what this is getting at?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Scott, yes. We put out the RFP with that intent on it so that others would be aware that we have started this process. So we have been approved. You'll see on your addendum that we've got notification from the province, and they've approved us up to $205,000 for the total project. Our total project isn't going to be anywhere near that now. So.
And do we know if this is allowed, like given the structure of the funding, are we allowed to bundle it in with something that, like work we were already planning?
We were already approved for
So
that.
they
The
know that this was the
application,
plan?
yes.
Okay.
The application I submitted with the work that we're currently doing, and it was approved.
Okay, great. That was everything I had on that. Thank you.
Okay. Any other matters of consent? Madam Clerk?
Councillor Dufour.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Dufour, apologize.
Yeah, item 6.8, I just had a quick question for Mr. Turco. In your documentation for the parking allowances and prohibitions on Pine Street, I noticed that there's a couple sections on Pine Street where there are on-street parking still allowed during certain times. Could you just explain some of the rationale behind those areas and tell us a bit about how those will be signed?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My understanding is that Pine Street, the entirety from Queen to Northern Avenue will be, there will be parking prohibitions on the entire, so I'm just wondering if was there a specific area that you were looking at, or?
Yeah, there was the area between Pleasant and Northern on the, I believe it's the east side, where there's specific hours listed.
Sorry, maybe it's not clear. On the second page of the report under add, it's Pine Street on both sides from Queen Street to Northern Avenue. The parking will be prohibited at all times.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry if it was unclear.
Yeah, sorry, it was confusing.
Do you have the clarity you're looking for, Councillor Dufour? Okay. Okay, Madam Clerk, motion for the consent agenda, please.
A motion by Councillors Hilsinger and Christian, resolved that all items listed under date August 12, 2019, agenda item 6, consent agenda, save and accept agenda items 6.5 and 6.9 be approved as recommended.
All in favor? Carried. So we will be dealing with 6.5 then, Madam Clerk?
That's correct.
I've got some questions on this.
Agenda item 6.5, MPAC real property assessment. I'll read the main motion, and then there is a proposed amendment to the main motion. The motion by Councilors Shoemaker and Christian resolved that the report of the Manager of Accounting and Tax Collector dated August 12, 2019, providing information on MPAC real property assessment be received as information. And the amendment resolved that the main motion be amended by inserting these words at the end of the motion. Further be it resolved that staff be requested to bring forward a framework for a community improvement plan to attempt to ensure that newly built unsold dwelling units that are owned by property developers remain partially exempt from taxation pending the sale of the dwelling unit to a third party.
Okay. Any comments, questions on that motion? All in favor? Oh, sorry, was that a question, Councilor Dufour?
Question.
Okay, go ahead.
I was just wondering, do we have a sense of how many properties this would affect? As far as I guess maybe that question would be best gone to.
Well, I'll have the CEO
Sure.
address that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Dufour, I'll turn to our tax collector to ask if she has any indication on how many properties this potentially affects.
I believe at this, sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, to CO. I don't have an exact number at this point, but I think it would be, 5 probably at the maximum at this point.
This isn't a large number of properties, so I can maybe give some context here. I had a developer approach me, and I think he made the very legitimate point that he developed a property, and as it used to work, MPAC wouldn't assess the property until you pulled the occupancy permit, right? So his property was assessed prior to him pulling the occupancy permit. And so he's got a vacant property that he hasn't sold, that no one's living there putting out garbage, and it's got a full assessment and a full tax rate. So he had went to MPAC, and they had advised him that there was a decision that the city made which changed when the property was assessed. So I raised that and discussed that with the finance department, and I guess that we used to not request those final assessments till the occupancy permit was pulled. Now they're assessed earlier in the process. As a result of that, you're catching some of these developers. What was happening, as I understand it, and staff can correct me, was that we had people that would do renovations to their home and then not pull their occupancy permit. So they would never get that assessment, and so it was a way to kind of maybe skirt the system. And so now they go a bit earlier. I think when there's a basement permit pulled, they're going to assess it. The unfortunate part of that is we catch these people that are developing and wanting to market their houses for sale, and they're paying full taxes on the house when it's not occupied. So the idea was to ask staff if there's something they could do about that. Where I was a little confused in reading this report was, in my discussions with staff, I understood that we did change that trigger point with MPAC. And I didn't get that impression from reading the report. The report gives me the impression, well, there's nothing much we can do. But in our discussions, my clear understanding was that, yeah, we asked them to assess prior to the final occupancy to, and if that's the case, it would seem to me we exercise some control over when they assess. And if we do exercise some control over when they assess, I was thinking, if you have these people that are developing these properties, and if there's only a half a dozen of them, or a dozen of them, or a dozen and a half of them, they shouldn't be charged to track those and not assess them until a period of time elapsed. I don't think you would let somebody have the property vacant for, forever and not assess properly, but I think there's a period of time where you'd want to give the developer an opportunity to sell the home. So I found the spirit of the report a bit inconsistent with the spirit of our discussions. So I don't know if you wanted to speak to that.
Certainly, Mayor Provenzano. When we spoke about it at the time, the incident happened when different staff were in place. When we did some follow-up, talked to MPAC, did some research, or looking at the act specifically, the responsibility clearly lies with MPAC to make the decision on to when and how much they assess for. We do have some involvement. We do provide them on a monthly basis with building permits and occupancy permits. We do, just as follow-up in our due diligence, to ensure the integrity of our role, we do make queries regarding certain properties that we note or notice have not been assessed yet. But the responsibility and the decision does clearly lie with MPAC.
But if we said to MPAC, don't assess until the occupancy permit's pulled, would they listen to that?
No, they would not. The occupancy permit is only one of the items that they consider.
So then I think it's important that we have that communication, because my understanding was they told this party that came to see me, well, the city changed this, it's the city's responsibility. They told us to assess it at this period. So there's that communication that's unclear, right? So
Correct.
what you're saying is they'll assess it when they want to assess it.
That's basically true. They have a responsibility to assess it at fair value.
Okay, so we started with you, Councillor Dufour, so before I go to Councillor Bruni and Councillor Nero, I'm going to finish with you.
Okay, thank you very much for that summary, Mr. Mayor. I think you you hit on the reason why I was asking about the number of properties that this captures, because I guess my only follow-up question, and especially concerning the amendment, is how much work is involved in creating a whole new community improvement plan that will capture, say 5 to 6 properties, and perhaps I'm getting too far ahead into what the report might have to say, but does that have any other downstream effects in the types of people who would then try to get into this community improvement plan? And perhaps that question can wait till the next report, but.
Yeah, I think we're just asking for a report back on developing
Yeah.
a SIP. So I think that we would have that discussion then, because if the staff didn't think it was worthwhile doing, they would clearly indicate that in the
Okay.
report back.
Thank you very much.
So Councillor Bruni and then Councillor Nero.
I might have missed this, but I would like to know, how does MPAC know that a developer has completed a house? And what's a definition of a completed house or resident once they build it? If they're missing things out of the building or out of the house, is it classified as completed or not?
So they have a definition of that. And so what used to happen is when the occupancy permit was pulled, they would go and look at it. Now I think when a permit's pulled, as Christina said, we share information on different levels of permits. So if a basement permit's pulled now, they'll go and see the house. And they'll assess whether it's substantially complete, and if it is, they'll assess it accordingly.
But for a developer that's building homes, how would MPAC know the house is completed?
Well, I think they would, Christine, would you like to speak to that?
Sir, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni. MPAC would follow up even if there isn't an occupancy permit. So they have homes in their areas on their radar that they would follow up with and do inspections on. In the event that they believe the house is substantially complete, or they may assess the property with an unfinished allowance. So they believe it's 80% done, but it's been in place for a year, or there's not a fine timeline. But the building has been substantially complete for a year with some unfinished amounts. They'll apply an allowance. So they believe the house is going to be worth $350,000, and they apply a 20% unfinished allowance to it to come up with the assessed value.
So MPAC will go in, and if the house is not completed, they'll provide a percentage, 80% or 70% or 60%, and the developer that would be his cost eventually for his tax base, right?
That's correct.
I just find it very unfair.
Sorry, it would be based on the current value. So that what
Yeah,
what
I
impact
just
determines
find it
the current value.
very unfair that these developers are being penalized. They're trying to build homes, and they're slapped with a tax base, basically. But MPAC is, I think, causing this. So if
A
you have
developer wouldn't be treated any differently than for any other real estate as an
Yeah.
individual, I think.
Okay, fair enough, thanks.
And I think that was the heart of the original motion, is we were trying to look for a way to give the developer a break. You know, if I build a house, you know, and I'm occupying that house, I should be paying full tax on that house. The developer should have a grace period if they're not living in the house and they're trying to market the house, because you don't want to do anything that discourages the developer developing the home.
So, just to add on, Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind. So a developer, what they'll do now is they'll probably not finish the home.
I think that you might see that. They might be less inclined to pull a permit to finish the basement or to not get to final completion
Exactly.
until yeah, that might happen. Councilor Nero?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to ask this question based on the fact that I'm seconding the amendment brought forward by Councilor Shoemaker. And there was some discussion between the two of us on the wording of that amendment. Originally, it was that we look at a report coming back to address a partial exemption from the assessment. But reading the report, I felt the same as you, is that I came to the conclusion there wasn't much we could do on the assessment part based on the report on the agenda. But I didn't know the backstory until you just told us a couple of minutes ago that there actually is something we can do. So I guess my question is to Councilor Shoemaker, the mover, do we want to come back with a report that addresses both an exemption partially from assessment and taxation, or either or? Because if we can do it with assessment, I think I would rather see it done at the assessment stage rather than the taxation stage.
Yeah, I'd be agreeable to adding and/or assessment on the motion.
Okay, so it's your amendment, so the two of you are able to do that.
Mr. Mayor, may I just have you turn the mic back to the tax collector? I'm not sure she's clear on what's being suggested, and I think she may have some information to add to that.
No, I wasn't sure what you were changing, what you were suggesting to change.
So
I'm sorry.
on the last, in the last few words, it says, dwelling units that are owned by property developers remain partially exempt from, right now it says taxation. I think the change would be from assessment and/or taxation pending the sale of the dwelling unit to a third party.
Well, I don't believe we can adjust the taxation, or the assessment.
Okay.
So I think taxation is correct.
Okay.
Isn't it?
Well, I thought the discussion just happened, I must have misunderstood. I'm left with the understanding that we can do something with the assessment.
I think where there might be a miscommunication here with Christine and the council is we don't have any effect on how the assessment. I think there's some question on whether we could affect the timing of the assessment.
That's what I'm speaking to.
Right. I understand that's what you're speaking to.
Yeah, and I think that brings us to where we want to be.
Yeah. So to ask the pointed question, if we were to say to MPAC, like if we were to give MPAC some direction as to when they assess, would they at all follow that?
I do not believe they would take that direction.
If that's the case, though, we have to speak to them because they shouldn't be telling somebody who goes to see them that we're assessing when the city tells us,
Correct.
right?
I
So there
agree.
has to be, if we don't have that authority or that ability to direct them not to assess at a certain stage in the permit process, then that isn't something that should be communicated out from MPAC.
Agreed.
I'm
So-
okay. I guess I guess it remains up to Councilor Shoemaker if we're adding assessment or not.
I think we can put it in there and it'll capture it if it's at all possible.
I don't see any harm in it.
Yeah.
It's not doable, it'll be reported back accordingly. So we're on the amendment. Everybody's familiar with the amendment. Councilor Shoemaker, did you want to speak to it?
Just very briefly.
Okay, go ahead.
I think the amendment's important. You mentioned that there is a distinction between an individual who builds property for themselves and a developer who builds a property for sale in the market. So right now, those two entities are being treated the same, and the developer is providing a service to the community, which is to increase our housing stock and to renew our housing stock. And so I think that until they go and actually sell the property to a third party, or for some defined period of time, there needs to be, I think, to encourage development in our city, there needs to be some sort of exemption from full taxation for those properties that are being marketed but not yet sold. So that's why I think it's imperative upon us to look at what options are available to us to achieve that.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Okay, so we're voting on the amendment. All in favor of the amendment? Now we're going to vote on the main motion, assuming the amendment's passed. So we'll vote on the main motion. Probably no requirement for discussion in the main motion. Okay, so we'll have the main motion pulled up here.
I've just got to add those, that assessment and/or taxation. So there you've got the main motion as amended.
Okay, so Madam Clerk, if you could read the main motion as amended, we'll vote on that.
It's resolved that the report of the manager of accounting and city tax collector dated August 12, 2019, providing information on MPAC real property assessment be received as information. Further be it resolved that staff be requested to bring forward a framework for a community improvement plan to attempt to ensure that newly built unsold dwelling units that are owned by property developers remain partially exempt from assessment and/or taxation pending the sale of the dwelling unit to a third party.
All in favor? Motion carried. So we have one matter left over from the consent agenda.
Which one, go to planning?
Oh, sorry, yeah, it's 5:30. We need to go to planning agenda. Madam Clerk, if we can,
Are you voting in the affirmative on
yeah.
that? Okay, under agenda item 7.7.1, A1119Z, 412 Second Line West and 236 Prentice Avenue. A motion by Councilor Shoemaker and Christian resolved that the report of the planner dated August 12, 2019 concerning rezoning application A1119Z be received and that City Council approve the application and rezone the subject properties from single detached residential zone to low density residential zone, subject to the condition that the development consist of a maximum of 6 units in 2 3-unit buildings. Further, that the legal department be directed to prepare the necessary bylaw to effect this approval.
So are you going to speak to this, Mr. Tenazzo? Or is Mr. Turco going to speak to this? Mr. Turco?
Sorry.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Councilor Shoemaker.
I'm the mover on the motion, and I'm content to do that for the purposes of just getting it on the floor, but I wish to amend it at some point. So I'm happy to be the mover procedurally, just to get it on the floor, but I do.
Is there somebody else that can?
Okay. So if you could please speak to it, Mr. Turco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The proposal is for a 6-unit multiple attached dwelling. It was, this matter was at the July council meeting. It was deferred to discuss a alternative that planning staff brought forward, which was to divide the development into 2 3-unit dwelling units, multiple attached dwelling units. Those discussions have taken place. The developer still wants to proceed as a one continuous 6-unit multiple attached dwelling. Staff's position still remains that it would be a better overall development, better integrated into the neighborhood if the development was developed as 2 3-unit multiple attached dwellings. So our recommendation still stands as it was at the previous meeting. The applicant is here to speak on the matter, as well as his granddaughter is here, who I believe may also be speaking on the matter.
Okay. Okay, so we'll give the applicant an opportunity to speak to the application.
Hi, Mr. Mayor and Council. My name is Jocelyn Fremlin, and this is my husband, Daniel Fremlin. We're speaking on behalf of our grandfather, Pasquale Lento, tonight. We'd like to thank you for inviting us to be here this evening, but we'd also ask for another deferral in regards to 412 Second Line West, as we have to revisit this and revisit our site plans for a cost analysis.
Okay, so there's a request for a deferral. Councillor Shoemaker, you wanted to speak to the matter?
Yes. I have a number of questions which I think will ultimately result in me moving a motion to remove the requirement that this be two separate buildings. So I don't know if that affects the request for the deferral at all.
Well, so it's a planning application, so there might be people here to speak in opposition to the planning application, so we actually have to go through that process unless it's going to be deferred. If it's going to be deferred, then we could deal with that deferral. If it's not going to be deferred and it's going to be heard as a planning application, I'd have to go through the process of giving everybody who's here to speak in favor of it the opportunity to, and everybody here to speak in opposition to it the opportunity to. So I think we really have to settle the deferral issue first. And if we settle the deferral issue, maybe these other issues will be worked out in the meantime. So I'm going to deal with that first. Councillor Nero?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I ask for a reason for the deferral to see if
I think the reason it communicated was they want to look at their cost estimates. There's probably a cost difference to building two separate buildings and building one building.
Yeah, so the reason for the deferral is we just want to do a cost analysis. If it's worth it to do two buildings opposed to one, the cost is going to be a lot more with two. So we just wanted to analyze it and see if it's going to be worth it or not.
Okay.
That's really the whole reason behind it. It's a lot more cost effective to do a one building, but with two, at more concrete, more excavation, more everything, more services.
How much time would you need for that, Mr. Freeman? When would the deferral be till?
A couple weeks would be good.
So if it was to our next meeting, which is September 9th, would that work for
I think
for
so,
you?
yeah, I think that'd be great.
Okay, so Councillor Nero?
based on the fact that the applicant is asking for the deferral, let's check this out, I'll certainly move.
Okay. Councillor Bruni seconds that. Okay, so we're going to deal with the deferral motion first. Thank you. Is there anybody here that's here to speak against the application? Is there anybody here that's opposed to deferral that wants to speak to that? Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to defer to our next meeting, which is September 9th. All in favor? So that motion's carried. And you can do your math. In the meantime, Councillor Shoemaker and any other councillors interested in planning's position, you can have those discussions with them. And hopefully, when it comes back on September 9th, we have a solution that everybody's satisfied with.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so Madam Clerk, we're at 7.7.2.
Agenda item 7.7.2, A1319Z, 71 Old Garden River Road. A motion by Councillor Hilsinger has a conflict, I believe, and so does Councillor Shoemaker. Councillor Bruni, can I put you again? By Councillors Bruni and Christian, resolved that the report of the planner dated August 12, 2019 concerning rezoning application A1319Z be received, and that City Council approve the application and rezone the subject property from light industrial zone to light industrial zone with a special exception to permit motor vehicle sales and parts dealers as an additional permitted use, subject to the condition that the applicant plant coniferous trees along the portion of the south lot line adjacent to 81 Sharon Crescent. Further, that the legal department be directed to prepare the necessary bylaw to effect this approval.
Okay, so you again, Mr. Turco, or you, Mr. Tenazzo? So can I have Mr. Tenazzo's mic, please? If you can speak to the application for the folks that are watching at home, please, Mr. Tenazzo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is the former Sutherland building, and the applicants are hoping to relocate North Shore Sports and Auto Inc. They're the local Skidoo BRP dealer. They sell ATVs, snowmobiles, boats, and other power sports equipment. The recommendation is to approve this application, subject to a condition that some additional plantings be put in place along the south lot line adjacent to 81 Sharon Crescent. There's a pretty good buffer along the whole way. Of special concern, obviously, when you have a commercial use and a residential use, the interface you want to make sure is buffered. There's a pretty good vegetated bush line, but there are some holes there, and the goal is to plug those holes essentially with some additional vegetation. And Mr. Acton here is present tonight to speak on behalf of the application.
Mr. Acton, would you like to speak on behalf of the application?
Well, Mr. Tenazzo was doing a very good job, I thought. We certainly agree with the planning report, which is in all of your papers. North Shore Sports and Auto have a successful ATV and snowmobile dealership. It's on Trunk Road or just off of Trunk Road. They did some great renovations to that business. They've grown the business and they need some more space.
And so when the EDC marketed the Sutherland building, they put in a bid and looked to renovate that building, improve it, and relocate their ATV sports facility into that light industrial zone. It's a light industrial zone which, given the current definition of light industry, doesn't include sales of what are in essence motor vehicles, although it's a use that's very compatible within that use. That particular area has been identified as commercial in the official plan, and in the Dillon report, which looked at the availability of commercial space in this city in 2018, Dillon recommended that more commercial space be recommended. So they're not looking for a wholesale change. They're simply looking for an exception to allow this motor vehicle, ATV dealership to locate where in that building. We agree with planning report in terms of the additional buffer. In fact, the Raquetas, Ryan and Jordan have reached out to the owners of 81 Sharon and indicated to those owners that they're completely in agreement with that and will ensure that those trees are planted of the type and nature which are both recommended and approved, and they'll get that done. It's a large lot. It's 4.21 acres. It has the advantage of having two driveways onto Old Garden River Road, which will avoid vehicles backing up. They'll come in, park, and leave. So when you have a load of ATV vehicles come in, the transport truck doesn't have to back up. It can drive into the lot, be unloaded, and continue on its way. Site plan control is in effect on this area, so anything they do will certainly have to accord with the site plan control and those regulations. That building, when it housed all of the Sutherland workers, had a lot of workers. There was a lot of traffic. So there's fewer workers and probably fewer traffic at times than when the Sutherland building was there. Work that are done on all of these machines are done inside. And so we do not expect, nor is there in their current location, any excess noise. There were some public comments which came in that said, gee, there's a vacant city property at the back, and you know, we hope there's not, this isn't used as some test track. It's not their property, they don't own it, and they would certainly have to respect, even if they did use it, they'd have to respect all of the noise bylaws, etc. That's not what their intent is. Their intent is to be a good neighbor in that very mixed use neighborhood, which has light industrial across the street. It has commercial, the Sault Ste building to the north, etc. So this use is really in character with the overall use of the neighborhood and within both the reports that have been provided to City Council and to Planning. And we would hope that this could be approved by Council. So subject to any of your questions, that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Acton. Council, do we have any questions for either the applicant through Mr. Acton or planning staff at this point? Councillor Vezo-Allen.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Acton, my only question, and it was brought up by the residents on Sharon. So if someone's coming in to buy an ATV or a snowmobile, and they want to test it out, is that something that's part of the business, or, you know, here's your ATV, we're delivering it, and there's not that test drive sort of thing in the parking lot and that sort of stuff?
They don't have a test track or a test area now, and there really isn't a test facility. Interestingly, unlike buying a car, where you'd usually test drive it, I confess I'm the owner of an ATV or two, and I've never test driven them before buying them.
Okay.
It's usually a friend, you've driven theirs or something, and but there's no place for you to go test drive it.
Thank you. I'm sure my 14-year-old would like to go test drive, so he'll be a little disappointed when I tell him that.
Okay. Are there any people in the gallery that are here to speak in opposition to the application? Ma'am, if you can just identify yourself at the microphone, please.
Good evening. My name is Susan Trezens. I live at 87 Sharon Crescent, so my property doesn't fully abut this development. I am concerned about things that have already been raised in terms of the noise levels, particularly for demonstrations / test drives. In terms of the gentleman who spoke earlier about the tree line, well, this afternoon or this morning, city workers were cutting down the trees along that city property. Potentially, they're going to put a new fence up, but all that tree shading is disappearing as of this week. So that noise barrier and privacy barrier is leaving us already. So that really sent a red flag up to me. In addition to the potential for test driving, there's also, the gentleman here also talked about, the trucks don't have to go around, but when you unload something, the forklifts and things will make noises. The garage doors will have beep beep sounds as well. This neighborhood has a fairly high density of seniors who are at home all day, and so this could be problematic for them. As well, if they're not going to use the city property as a test track, could they ensure that a fence is raised so there would not be an ability for them to use that property as a test track, because it has now been deforested by the city itself, has taken and removed all the trees for access to fix these fences. So it's a prime location. I know on Sharon Crescent there are residents who have skidoos particularly, and in the winter, when they rev up, man, can you hear them go around the block because it's circular. And so there is concern in the neighborhood about that kind of noise, and, this isn't the only thing. I mean, at night, if someone from emergency services is called out, boy, I can hear the ambulances roar out of their building, and it can wake me up at 3 or 4 in the morning. I don't want to stop people's lives from being saved, but, this is just going to be an additional noise variance for our area. And I also worry that with this type of development, it could, people who want to sell their houses may find that it's less desirable of an area if there's an increase of noise. I know people have said to us, oh, you have a lovely neighborhood, so many trees, it's so quiet. And I'm just here to try to preserve that type of community spirit. Thank you.
So, ma'am, if I understood your concern correctly, you're mainly concerned with noise.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to ask whomever from our planning departments feels best able to address that. Mr. Tenazzo, she raised an issue that largely relates to noise, but there was some discussion about the city taking down its own trees on the property that we own that abuts this property. If you can speak to that and the noise issue in general for council, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the first point about the trees coming down, I caught word of it today. Now, I didn't get out there myself, but one of my colleagues did get out to the site and spoke with, I think, Public Works staff, and they were just doing a little bit of pruning. I don't think, again, I wasn't there myself, I don't think they were removing the trees, and it's totally unrelated to this. They were doing some pruning, I believe, because either one of the neighbors or Public Works, I wasn't clear on that, but somebody had requested they wanted to get better access to their fence so they can do some repairs. So I believe, from what I heard, that's what the tree removal was about. Mr. Girardi.
Mr. Girardi, do you have more to add on that point?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and just adding to what Mr. Tenazzo has said, the city is in there doing some fence repairs right now. This has been on our books for about a couple of years, and we've had to do repairs on the fences by requests by the neighbors up in that area. So we're in there doing those repairs and getting those repairs done now. That's why the trees are being cut for access.
This doesn't relate to the application at all, or shouldn't affect the applicants, or they shouldn't be responsible for it. except for the concerns that are being expressed about the noise. So if we can address
Yeah.
the noise issue, then that would be.
So from a noise standpoint, I've taken some general measurements here. Between the southeast corner of the building and the rear lot line of 81 Sharon Crescent, which is the nearest residential property and the one that actually abuts the subject property, as you move further east, you're abutting a different property at that point. That's about 150 feet away. And when you look at the applicant's site plan, we work with the applicant to make sure that, if you want to call it the noxious part of the use, which is essentially, I think, folks loading and unloading ATVs and snowmobiles, we made sure that that was at the northeast corner of the building to keep that away from the residents to the south. So I think when you look at the buffering, the fence and the foliage right now meets our zoning bylaw requirement. We've, in discussions with the applicants and the neighbors at 81, we've agreed that let's make a condition to put some additional trees. But right now, the buffering requirements are being adhered to. And I think when you look at the way that they've got their area laid out with the shipping containers, or not the shipping containers, sorry, the skidoo and the ATV crates at the back, that's gonna create an added buffer to those residences that are further east on Sharon Crescent. So I'm confident that noise won't be an issue here, and that it's well within the neighborhood, the character of this mixed neighborhood.
Okay. So do we have any other questions, council, from any of either the applicants or the staff? It's like I'm distracted. Is there anybody else here that wishes to speak against the application? Seeing none, Mr. Acton, did you want to say a final few words before we vote on the application?
Just this, to try and provide some comfort to the neighbors in terms of the noise. They don't even own dealer plates like you would have to test drive a car, nor do they have the insurance coverage, which covers them for test driving. So that's not a service or a feature that is provided.
It's just a matter of loading and unloading the ATVs. And what I heard staff say was, in site plan control, we're ensuring that they're doing that at the farthest possible point from the residential neighbors.
Exactly correct.
Okay, so all in favor of the application? Did you read the motion, madam? You did. All in favor of the application? Opposed? The application carries.
Okay. Agenda item 6.9 was accepted from consent. That was A819Z22 McDonald Avenue, the LPAT appeal, but it is actually a bylaw. The bylaw has also been accepted from consent due to Councillor Shoemaker's conflict. And it's a motion by Councillors Hilsinger and Christian, resolved that bylaw 2019-151 being a bylaw to repeal bylaw 2019-80 being a bylaw to amend Sault Ste. Marie zoning bylaws 2005-150 and 2005-151, and bylaw 2019-151 being a bylaw to designate the lands and area of site plan control for 22 McDonald Avenue be passed in open council this 12th day of August 2019. This is 11.1.1.
Okay.
And there had been a request by some of the neighbors to speak to it, but they were advised that because the bylaws are being repealed and because the applicant isn't here to speak to it, that it wouldn't be appropriate that they speak at this particular time.
They'll be able to speak now.
In the event that another application is submitted, they'd have the opportunity to speak then.
Okay. Are the residents here for this resolution? So presently, this application is withdrawn, so we won't give you permission to speak tonight because the applicant is not here. When the applicant puts in another proposal, then you'll have a chance to speak at that time. Do you understand? Okay. Okay.
Okay, I've got it open to vote.
Pardon?
The vote's open.
The vote is open?
In favor? Okay. Motion carries. So then we'll go to agenda item 8.1, St. Mary's River Heritage. It's a motion by Councillors Christian and Shoemaker, whereas the St. Mary's River has been a key part of life and work in the place known as Bawating and Sault Ste. Marie for thousands of years. And whereas local industry, whether it is whitefish harvesting, commercial shipping, steel manufacturing, paper production, aviation, tourism, or others, has always had an intimate connection to the St. Mary's River. And whereas the St. Mary's River has and continues to provide excellent opportunities for leisure and recreational activities both on land and on water year-round. And whereas the St. Mary's River Valley is formed from rock that is at least 2.5 billion years old and provides significant habitat for many diverse species. And whereas the St. Mary's River is intimately tied to the culture and heritage of Indigenous people of the region. And whereas the St. Mary's River was designated in the year 2000 to the Canadian Heritage River System in recognition of its outstanding cultural, recreational, and natural heritage values. And whereas the existing heritage information plaques located on the city's waterfront boardwalk were first installed almost 30 years ago, now therefore be it resolved that Council establish a committee to study opportunities along the city's waterfront for a St. Mary's River Heritage Walk to celebrate and raise awareness among residents and visitors. And be it further resolved that Council appoint Councillors Christian, Shoemaker, and a third councillor to be named, with appropriate municipal staff as resource to this committee. And be it further resolved that this committee, as part of its mandate, engage and work with the Municipal Heritage Committee, the Indigenous community, as well as other relevant stakeholders on this initiative.
Thank you. I guess as a mover, Councillor Christian, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. This idea, actually, I've had for quite a while. I've spoken to Mayor Provenzano on this a year or so ago, and I had general conversations vetting the idea through planning. And I think at this time, it's a good idea to formalize a resolution and bring it before council. And the concept really is similar to other heritage and tourism attractions that you'd see in places like Halifax or Boston that try to celebrate the city's history through a variety and series of information components. As the resolution says, my concept at this point, and it's just a concept, it's just an idea, that it'd be on the city's waterfront boardwalk, that there would be plaques and displays and perhaps artifacts that would be displayed throughout the entire walk, and they'd be done so in chronological order so that anybody walking the length of the displays would essentially be walking through history. The things that I would hope that we'd focus on, I won't touch on because they're part of the resolution. So I think those are pretty self-explanatory. And the only other thing I want to say is I do think it's an important initiative. I think it's something that we should do. Namely, it supports the downtown redevelopment. I think this would lend itself well to that. It's obviously going to enhance the waterfront, both for citizens and visitors. I think it'll support the existing museums in what I call the Heritage Corner. We have the Bush Plain Museum, we have the Ermatinger National Heritage Site, and of course the City Museum. It would serve as an education component for students, citizens, and tourists alike. But I think more importantly, it would give a lot of pride and morale, as it's stated in the plaza development, to the city of Sault Ste. Marie. We live in a very special place. It's historically significant in terms of Canada's development, and I don't think we celebrate it enough. I think if we're going to move forward into the future, we need to celebrate our past and recognize our achievements. So I think this project will lend itself well to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Christian. Does Councillor Shoemaker want to add anything? You're the seconder on this.
No.
Okay.
Just thank Councillor Shoemaker.
Well, thank you very much. Good.
Is there a third member of council who,
Yeah.
whose name I can put in to sit on the committee?
Councillor
Gardy?
Yeah.
It's open to vote.
I vote yes.
I'll do it for you. It carries. And we'll move to bylaws. I have a motion by Councillors Hilsinger and Christian, resolved that all bylaws under item 11 of the agenda under date August 12, 2019, save and accept bylaws 2019-151, 2019-153, and 2019-154 be approved.
All in favor? Or vote?
Councillor Christian? Councillor Shoemaker, I think I just saw your message. I think that goes farther than what the Saddle Crescent discussion was tonight, so that should be a broader motion that comes forward at a subsequent meeting, I think.
Yeah, I was just going to, I think there's folks here who were concerned with that, and I was just going to note that there were some specific targets those folks on Saddle had to meet to be able to bring that petition forward. And so I can discuss that with them afterwards.
I understand that there are
yeah.
further discussions about people smoking on property adjacent to the hospital and parking on streets other than Saddle Crescent, but I don't think you can tie that to the Saddle Crescent report that's on tonight.
Correct, thank you.
Under agenda item 11.1.3, a motion by Councillors Hilsinger and Christian, resolved that bylaw 2019-153 being a bylaw to adopt amendment number 224 to the official plan for the city of Sault Ste. Marie, Long Holdings, Inc., Lean here, 647 McDonald Avenue, be passed in open council this 12th day of August 2019.
Please vote.
In the affirmative, Councillor Bruni?
Pardon?
Are you voting in the affirmative?
Yes.
Okay.
For.
And Councillor Christian's left the room. I need a seconder for this one.
Can we have a seconder for this one here?
Dufour?
Councillor Dufour?
A motion by Councillors Hilsinger and Dufour, resolved that bylaw 2019-154 being a bylaw to amend Sault Ste. Marie zoning bylaws 2005-150 and 2005-151 concerning lands located at 647 McDonald Avenue, Long Holdings Incorporated, be passed in open council this 12th day of August 2019. And I think we're finally there. Councillor Christian has left the chamber. Councillor Dufour, can I put you again for the closed session?
Yes.
Motion by Councillors Hilsinger and Dufour, resolved that this council proceed into closed session to discuss a proposed disposition of property and an issue regarding labor relations or employee negotiations. Further be it resolved that should the said closed session be adjourned, the council may reconvene in closed session to continue to discuss the same matter without the need for a further authorizing resolution.
Should we vote?
He was doing it for you. I will correct that. A motion by Councillors Hilsinger and Christian that we now adjourn.
All in favor? Motion carried.
I don't think he... I voted no.